Greetings everyone, my name is Stephen Oostenbrugge and I am the Executive Director for the Institute of Certified Professional Managers, also known as ICPM. I want to take a few minutes today to set the record straight on something that has been confused, debated, and frankly misinterpreted for decades. And that is the relationship between management and leadership. You've probably heard this conversation before. Management versus leadership. Leaders are visionaries. Managers are task-focused. Leadership is inspirational. Management is operational. Sometimes it's framed as a progression, where you graduate from management into leadership. Other times it's framed as something you're either born into or not. And almost always it's presented as if these are separate ideas, separate roles, or separate people. That framing does real damage. So let's slow this down and talk plainly about what's actually true. Management and leadership are not levels. One is not above the other, one does not replace the other, and they are absolutely not mutually exclusive. You can have great leaders who are also great managers. You can have great managers who are also and lead exceptionally well. Sometimes these responsibilities live in different people. Sometimes they live in the same person. Either way, organizations need both working together in service of the same purpose. At its core, management is largely task and technologically driven. Managers live in the moment. Today's work, this week's deadlines, this quarter's performance. Managers are accountable for execution, consistency, and follow-through. They plan work, they organize resources, they control process, and yes, they lead people. Leadership, on the other hand, tends to operate on a longer horizon. Leadership lives in the decade. It focuses on direction, purpose, culture, and where organizations want to become over time. Leadership requires a higher plane of thinking and doing, not because it's superior, but because it's oriented towards what's next. Neither of these is better than the other. They are different responsibilities with different time horizons. Problems begin when we assume that being strong in one automatically guarantees strength in the other. You can inspire people and still struggle with execution. You can manage systems well and still struggle to influence or motivate. Vision does not automatically create structure, and discipline does not automatically create trust. And yet, organizations assume both all the time. Here's another misconception that needs to be corrected. Many people believe that in order to become a great leader, you must first become a great manager. Others believe leadership is something you're born into, some innate trait that certain people just have. What you almost never hear is anyone saying that they were born into management. That should tell you something. Neither leadership nor management is automatic. Neither is innate. Both can be learned. Both can be developed, and both require intentional practice. Leadership behaviors often appear long before titles do. People lead projects. They lead peers. They lead initiatives and change without ever being called managers. You do not need to start in management to practice leadership, and you certainly don't need a management title to lead. At the same time, the moment you accept responsibility for managing people, leadership is no longer optional. It is part of the job. This is where another false separation creeps in. When we talk about the core responsibilities of management, we usually talk about planning, organizing, controlling, and leading. That last one matters because lead means leadership. Leadership is not something managers occasionally do on the side. It is built directly into the role. If leadership is a core function of management, then separating the two isn't clarity, it's confusion. Now let's talk about mission and vision, because this is where everything comes together. Leadership defines the vision. Vision is what the organization wants to become over time. Management executes the mission. The mission is the work that must be done day after day to move the organization towards that vision. Strategy is what connects the two. It aligns mission to vision and guides decision-making along the way. You don't reach a vision by talking about it. You reach it by executing the mission, and that only works when leadership and management operate together, guided by strategy. Leadership drives managers by setting direction, priorities, and intent. Good managers don't just execute blindly. They help leadership by translating strategy into reality. And they also drive leadership forward by providing feedback, insight, and operational truth from the front lines. Leadership without management stalls. Management without leadership drifts. Strategy fails without both. And this is important to say clearly. Leadership and management are roles, not personality types. In some organizations, those roles are held by different people. In others, they exist in the same person. Either way, separating them in theory while expecting alignment in practice is where organizations break down. Another myth worth correcting is the idea that leadership only exists at the top of the organization. That simply isn't true. Even the lowest level supervisors lead people every day. They set expectations. They influence behavior. They model accountability. Leadership shows up whenever people depend on someone else, regardless of title. I've seen it firsthand. During my time in the Marine Corps, I worked for some incredible leaders and managers. There were high-ranking officers I would have followed anywhere without hesitation. And there were others I wouldn't have trusted to give me directions across the street. I saw managers who genuinely cared about the Marines, about readiness, about morale, about doing the job the right way. And I saw others who were far more interested in power than responsibility, even when it came at the expense of the people they were supposed to lead. The difference was never rank. It wasn't authority, and it certainly wasn't talent. It was how leadership and management were practiced, or not practiced, in the service of the mission. That lesson applies everywhere, not just in uniform. People don't follow titles. They follow trust, competence, and consistency. History gives us plenty of examples of this distinction as well. There have been extraordinary leaders with immense visions who struggle with day-to-day management early in their careers. There have been managers who have not particularly charismatic, but were exceptional at executing the mission and delivering results. And there have been individuals who learned to do both, aligning vision, mission, and strategy in a way that allowed organizations to succeed at scale. What those examples all have in common is this. Leadership and management were not assumed. They were developed. They were practiced. And when they failed, the consequences were real. So here's the takeaway that matters most. You do not need to be a manager in order to learn leadership. Leadership shows up long before titles do. But once you accept responsibility for managing others, leadership becomes part of the job, not an optional add-on. Management and leadership do not need to be separate ideas, and they do not need to be separate people. And there is no hierarchy that places one above the other. They are different responsibilities that must be aligned around mission, vision, and strategy to achieve what the organization wants to become. This is exactly where ICPM fits. ICPM does not exist to certify vision. It does not exist to certify charisma, and it exists to validate general management competence, an ability to responsibly execute the mission through people, performance, and decisions in alignment with strategy. because no vision survives poor management, and no strategy succeeds without competent execution. If leadership and management are learned, then development and validations matter. Titles don't guarantee competence. Time served doesn't prove capability. Assuming someone can manage people just because they've been promoted is a mistake. And whether you're in uniform, in a corporation, or in a growing organization. So if you are a supervisor, a manager, or an aspiring leader who is responsible for people, performance, and outcomes, and you want independent validation of your general management competence, I encourage you to explore ICPM today. Visit icpm.net. Learn more about the Certified Supervisor and Certified Manager credentials. See whether general management certification aligns with where you are in your career and where you want to go next. For many professionals, ICPM represents the foundation that allows leadership and management to work together effectively and responsibly in the service of the mission and the vision. And if that sounds like you, we'd be glad to support you on that journey.